back to my channel. I'm your host Steven. Today's episode is a continuation of our How Does a Clarinet Get Blown Out? In this case, we're going to talk about the wood. What I have here is a slab of wood. It's not African Blackwood, but I brought it here for demonstration. What we can see here is a piece of waste wood, and we can see voids in the wood, see a knot in the wood, you can see a branch off the wood. You can see how the wood is inconsistent throughout. And when you think about when they cut timber to create billets, they have to get these out of it. Looking from this point of view, we can see the center point of the wood is actually right here, where this is cut out from. This is where the wood gets most of the nutrients from. So technically, you want a billet from that middle section of the wood, assume it wasn't cracked, and other voids and other crystallization of minerals in it. But it's also not the best place for the wood, but it's the best place where if there's any expansion, it's more consistent throughout the timber itself. What we're looking at here is a picture from 1935 from Selmer Paris about ebony delivery. So you see the chunks of wood they used back then. This still happens today. This still happens today, but different quantities and different species too. And what we'll see here, if we take a look at the wood, you can see cracks down the middle, cracks down the side, cracks down the middle. And the X really is the middle of the branch itself. This branch we're looking at the left-hand side, this one guy's kind of holding. You know, it has two pieces to the branch in a way, and this X is in the middle of it. Now the X itself may actually, if you look over here on the right-hand side, bottom right, you can see there's an X here going through a couple cracks. So that just marks the middle. It doesn't mark the best piece of the wood. And we have to understand how wood is. So from a two-dimensional point, we're going to take a look at a quick discussion of how we cut wood billets from here. What we're looking at here is basically a two-dimensional slice of a perfectly round piece of wood. The inner circles would be the rings of the wood as it grows out. But of course, wood isn't always perfect anyways. But this is the area that people have concern with when they talk about a wood clarinet being blown out, is over time, what happens to this wood if it moves and stuff like that. What we're looking at here is the blue square is the prime square where if there is any expansion of the wood, it would be equal going all the way around it. Now, in manufacturing of clarinets, and you can see this in the Buffet Step 1 video I have and Selmer Paris video I have in my playlists for manufacturers of how they stabilize the wood. Okay, at first they let it dry, the original timbers. Then they cut those and they put them into a drying kiln. You know, and when they're actually in cylinders, they're in a drying kiln. And this helps stabilize the wood a bit. And then what they do is then they induce basically a pressurized dipping in linseed oil and other oils and nutrients in it to bring back the life and color of the wood. This is its most stable form. And the oils in the wood is to dispel water. If water gets in wood, water has a greater expansion rate than the oils would at varying temperatures. So let's say you displace all the oil in your clarinet wood with water, and you put this out in your car over a night that's as freezing temperatures. That water will freeze and expand, and it's going to push the wood and basically splinter the wood all over the place, assuming it was all water instead of oil. So the oil is there to get rid of the water, make sure there's no water there. If you check my end of screen splash page, I'm going to put the one video I have on there of how to identify when to oil a barrel, because the barrel is really the first indication of when you need to oil your clarinet. If anything, at least oiling the barrel sockets and the upper portion of the upper joint. But anyways, the middle square, the blue square, is the most perfect piece of the wood, assuming the wood is perfectly round and the growth rings are perfectly round themselves. But that's not the case in most instances. There's cracks and splits. There's voids in the wood where it gets thrown out. Matter of fact, 90% of wood is scrapped for clarinet manufacturing. If we look at the other four pieces here, the top, bottom, left, and right one, we'll see that the rings, if this were to expand, would expand in one direction, in essence, but in outward motion. That would take any bore, any circular bore, if it were to expand, into a weird shape. And of course, being three-dimensional, not two-dimensional like this, if the timber of the clarinet joint were to expand because of water or other tragic incidents, whatever it may be, large temperature fluctuations, it technically could warp the clarinet. The timber itself shouldn't move too much. I've had some extremely dry instances of clarinets, and I'm not the type where I'll put the clarinet joint under oil, because I think that also adds potential problems, because then you get oil underneath any posts and everything like that, so you need to have the posts removed, which you normally do anyways, but it's a lot of work. But the trouble is then you have to dry it, and then you have to leach out the extra oil. So I try to just introduce enough oil to stabilize the piece of wood, piece of timber itself, because over time you can get additional oil leaching out of the wood underneath the posts and everything. And that may not seem like much of a problem, except that's where a lot of the green junk comes from, is when that oil becomes really rancid over time. But getting back to this diagram here, we can see how clarinets are not perfect cylinders based upon perfect cylinders of wood. The wood itself is nowhere near perfect. What I want to show in these images here, these are from Selmer Paris, is you see the billet on the very top. What happens with the billet then is you drill a center bore down the billet. It's just a cylindrical bore. It's not any final bore. It's just really a hole, because that gives you a centering point for the centers to be put on there. And then you basically bore the billet down to a cylinder, first phase of the cylinder. Then you'll see it's further refined on the third one down into a more of a perfect cylinder. And this is where it goes into the automated 3D cutting machines. Then the middle item you can see here is you got the cylinder, you got a ring on the side, you got a tenon. The fourth one, which is an upper joint now, you got a metal tenon on one side, metal wood tenon on the other side with the end cap on it, and you got the cylinder. Second one from the bottom is then drills out, actually drills out the bore more, which you don't see, but it drills out the tone holes and everything. And the last picture is when someone actually installs the posts onto it and the corks too. But that's how you go from billet to joint. This is an example of a bell. You got a billet in the kind of shape of a bell. Then you see they cut a bore through it so it can be centered properly, and it starts getting a shape. Then they continue cutting the shape in a 3D cutter and cut the inside of the bore too, and you get the finalized version of the bell. And here's a barrel, smaller billet. You see a cylinder here with a basic bore on it. Then you see a barrel with sockets, and it's cut out for the rings. Then the final version of the rings and has a final bore in it. Another thing I want to review here is from the Empire Forest Review about East African Blackwood. And this goes into some of the information I was talking about before with just the two-dimensional slice we're talking about. And also the 1935 picture of Selmer Paris. You can see these are the problems they have with wood. You get ingrowth holes in the heart, you got rotten pockets, you have voids in it. You got these flutes. In the second picture on the left, you can see you got a double heart piece, but you can see it has cracks in the middle of it. So it's very hard to get perfect wood. Like the second picture on the right-hand side down, or the fourth one actually, you have a branch. Branch isn't perfectly going out. This one curves up. So it's very hard to get perfect pieces out of it. And of course, you got knots in it too. This document actually went and it talks about what they do and how they convert a piece of Blackwood to be manufactured into a musical instrument. I'll leave this on the screen for you to actually read. I'm not going to read through it. What picture you're looking at here is a 1935 Selmer Paris, once again, cutting room. So this place to actually cut these into the square billets for the clarinet joints. It's kind of interesting. If you look in the back room here, you can see logs back there that are fairly, I don't want to say cylindrical, fairly straight logs. So they're ready to cut out the major angles of a log. And then you see a gigantic scrap pile near the door. So as these guys are cutting out billets for particular pieces, they're cutting out chunks of wood and figuring out whether it's going to be a barrel chunk or upper joint billet, lower joint billet, bell billet, or alto clarinet, bass clarinet, whichever instrument it may be, or maybe even flute also at this time.
We can see in this, you can see how the grain tends to go up and then back down, so it's inconsistent grain. And here it'll flow up and down some more. So if you think about wood expansion over time, or if it's introduced to something other than oil, oil is very stable over a wide variety of temperatures, versus like water, which comes from your mouth as you breathe. And heat comes from your mouth too. Is if you get expansion of the wood, this is going to be inconsistent when it's made into a clarinet. This is Madagascar Ebony. This is after it's been turned just to a cylinder. There's no bore in it yet, but it's just a cylinder. And this more easily you can see how this has grown. This, of course, the center of it. So this is a very good piece of wood. This example here is rosewood, just turned down before it's bored out. This would probably be a couple barrels. But we can see it has good consistency in the wood itself. You can see how this kind of curves up and curves back down. This is some Redheart wood. You can see the grain here as it goes up and comes back down. So if this is actually clarinet, if it were to expand, it would expand at this angle down here and at different angles. Here's some really dense African Blackwood. And if we look at it from the end here, we can see how that is not a circular pattern. There's saw blade cuts in here, but it's not a circular pattern at all. So the expansion of the wood would actually be diagonal to it. So that's why I use African Blackwood. It's a very dense wood. It's a very stable wood, which being dense, it also helps keep water out of it. But you'll want to always look at your clarinet barrels. When you have a clarinet, the part that gets affected most from the condensation from your breath is the barrel and this part of the upper joint. And I have a video of how to identify when to oil your barrel. And it's basically when it gets discolored on the inside. So you always want to be checking your barrels. Anyways, in my opinion, can a clarinet get blown out from the wood moving over time? Well, I guess it could, because there are many things at play here that could happen. But it should be the last resort to modify tone holes, and then at that point only top technicians, those that specialize in clarinets. But also in an upcoming video I'm going to be talking about the register vent, because even a slightly clogged register vent can have some totally disastrous tone results, where one can think an instrument is blown out and can lose its depth and breadth of tone, especially in the upper register, the third register, when you actually use it, of course. So those are more of my opinions about blown out clarinets. What are your thoughts about blown out clarinets and, the wood itself? I want to thank you for listening today. Any questions or comments, please post them down below. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Gotta love the knowledge, gotta love life, gotta love clarinets. You gotta love the African Blackwood too. We'll see you next time.